All right, welcome everybody. So I wanted to update you on some things and give you some resources and kind of explain to you what you should be doing to get ready for the upcoming exam. So remember, the exam is after Chapter 3, so it's still a little ways off, but we're getting close to it, right? It's going to be around the end of the month, right around in there. I'll update shortly with the steps you're going to have to go through when we do the actual exam. But first, you should focus on preparing for the exam itself. Okay. So, and one thing that I wanted to get out of the way right away, I've had some discussions with students in the last week that lead me to believe that some people don't know about the announcements tab up here. I've made numerous announcements in this course, and if you're not seeing those announcements, then you are missing valuable information that could be argued is critical enough to possibly keep people from passing the course. So if you have not yet, please go up and look at the up here in announcements, kind of above my head there on the screen. It's over on the left of Canvas, blue announcements. Those of you who have not seen those, please click on that and read those announcements. Some of them are even in video form, so you don't even have to do any reading. You just watch me talk. But it's important information about how the course works. So make sure that you're seeing those and check back with that occasionally in the future. Right? I think some of the trouble that students have been having would have been fixed if they had understood about the announcements right there. So please pay attention to those announcements. I am leaving updates sometimes in the Canvas column of the modules themselves, but sometimes I send them out as an announcement. So you should be looking for information in both of those places so that you have full knowledge that you need in order to complete the course successfully. Okay? If you have questions or concerns, please message me through Canvas or come to my office hours or any of that kind of stuff, and I can help sort of explain things to you. But a lot is explained in this announcements right there. Okay? I also, let's get into the practice exam. So I've posted a practice exam here. The practice exam is similar but not identical to the test that you're going to take for the course. Okay, so the actual test that you take will be a little bit different. And we'll go through that. So I reserve the right to change problems, right? So just because one type of problem was on the test or was not on the test does not guarantee that you're going to see that type of problem on the actual test. Okay, some of them, I'll go ahead and let you know, some of them, like 4 or 5 problems, are going to be on the test, and some of them even end up on the final. So in a few minutes, I'll go through and give you some information about particular problems on the practice test. But for now, just realize this practice test is meant to be a starting point. Some people treat it as an ending point for their studying. The practice test should be a starting point. So here's the idea of how you should prepare for an exam in an online class like this. You should print out the practice exam, right? Don't just try to look at it on a screen. It's really helpful to print it out. I would recommend that you work on it by yourself first. Right? It's very easy when you're working in groups to think, oh, we're blasting through this thing. But that's, a lot of times because each person is contributing to doing those problems. And yet if you were by yourself, you wouldn't have been able to get through it without those hints and helpful tips that people are giving when you're working together. So it's always a good idea to work through the practice exam first by yourself. And that way you can go through and you can mark the problems with the ones that you got easily, the ones that you got, but maybe you should look at a little bit more, and then the ones that you just had no idea how to do. You can classify those problems in that way. And one thing is, even if there's stuff that you thought was really easy when we learned it, if you learned it 3 or 4 weeks ago, then it's easy to forget the material. So make sure that you go back, even the stuff you thought was easy, spend a little bit of time studying that material, because sometimes people miss the easy problems just because they didn't look at it again before they took the test, and then they kind of blanked on it. So make sure you're not doing that. And then once you've worked on it by yourself, then by all means, get together in groups, study groups, jump on Discord, you get audio chat channel in Discord. You've got a discussion right here, which you'll want to respond to. So you can use the discussion here for questions, but And this is one resource, but I wouldn't recommend that this discussion board be your entire resource for studying for this exam. It's probably not going to be enough for most people. It's very helpful, but it's not like the whole thing. Okay, so then what you're going to do is you're going to come here. We have a discussion board where you can earn points in 3 different ways. So you can ask a well-informed question. So usually that means you've already worked on the question a little bit, right? It's hard to help someone when they just say, how do you do 7? How do you do problem number 7? I don't know how to do that. You should be able to get a little bit into the problem, a little bit of progress, find examples out of the book, watch some of the videos, and you should be able to make some kind of progress. So a better question, you come in and you say, hey, I'm working on number 3, and I was able to get to this point, and I think I'm right, but then everything kind of falls apart here, and show your work in the comment. And ask a question that way. That's a legitimate way to communicate about the exam. You can also answer someone else's question. So if you come on here and you see someone has a question, you go, oh, I see what they did wrong, because they put their work in there and they said what they were doing, and you go, oh, I think this step is where your mistake is, and you help that person fix that. That's another way to earn points on this discussion board. Or the third way to get points is you can leave the entire solution, not just the answer, but the entire, because that doesn't really help people, right? If you just say, oh, the answer to number 10 is, 4, that doesn't really help people know how to do it. So if you write up the solution with all the steps, and that's well done, you can earn points that way. So 3 different ways to earn points on this, plus the discussion board itself will probably help you. Okay, so you've got your different problems that you're looking at here. So this first problem, this is about transformations. So you're basically describing the transformations that are the differences between these 2 functions here. We've got average rate of change. This one's pretty straightforward. There's examples right in the ebook that you can basically follow along and remind yourself how to do that. This one is about circles and taking circles and writing them in the form that nice equation form. So we have that nice equation of a circle that we can immediately identify the center and the radius without really having to do much work. But our circle is not in that form. Okay, so you have to put it in that form and then graph the circle. So, it's the whole steps we did with completing the square to get the circle equation in the right form. And this is a good example here of when you're taking the test and with the practice test, make sure you read the directions. When I grade tests, certain problems on these tests, sometimes what I see is students will do part of the problem, basically showing me that they know what they're talking about, but they move on before answering all the questions. So it's kind of a bummer on a problem like this when I have to take points off, when it's pretty clear that the student probably understands everything, but they just didn't answer the question. So notice here I say put the equation in standard form. So that means first you do the algebra to put it in the form where you can see the center and the radius. Then I say identify the center and the radius. So that means, you would write center and then you would write what the center is equal to. You would write radius and then write what the radius is equal to. So those should be described somewhere on the page. Specifically, explicitly state the radius and the center, because I asked you to do that. And then I ask you to graph it. So there's really like 3 parts to this problem. So please make sure that you do all of them, because if you've done the work to do it, you might as well make sure you get all the points for doing it, right? You don't want to do most of the work and only get half the credit. So please always make sure when you're done with the question, reread the question and just double check that you actually answered everything that I asked for, okay? I want you to get all your points. There's a graphing a piecewise function. You're definitely going to have to do that. There's definitely going to be a problem like that on the test. So make sure that you know how to look at a piecewise function here and graph the thing. Difference quotient, there's definitely going to be a difference quotient on the test, and it will be some type of quadratic, so some type of second degree polynomial. So make sure that you can work through a problem like that. Identifying even, odd, and neither functions. It is not just the even or oddness of the exponent, right? I've even seen tutors kind of teach students that. and it's not necessarily always the case. And those of you who are going on to trigonometry, there's even an odd functions in trigonometry that don't even have exponents. So don't just think about it as even and odd exponents. That will lead to problems down the road. We've got a composition. Just make sure this problem 7 is about composition. Make sure you can do that. Number 8 is about finding the inverse. So, oops, looks like I have a little typo here. This should just be normal function notation. So the x should be in front. Okay, so it should say f of x equals x plus 3 over 2x minus 1. That's how it'll look on the test. You're just reading a composition, right? We've got -3 put through g, put through f, but we're just getting that information in graph form. So you're used to doing this with an algebraic form. Now we're doing it in graph form. That's the only difference between these. So just work from the inside out. Take -3, put it into g, whatever comes out, put it into f. Here we have a division problem. For the division problem on the exam, if you use synthetic division, I'm not going to necessarily mark you wrong, but you should be aware. Sometimes I put polynomial division problems on the test where you cannot use synthetic division. So make sure you are ready to use polynomial long division if that's the one that you have to use. Because remember, polynomial long division always works. Synthetic division is nice when it works, but it doesn't always work. So like in this case, you wouldn't want to use synthetic division on this problem. Technically, you could do a bunch of work and do it with synthetic division, but that extra work makes it harder than just doing the long division. So make sure you can do long division. This is one of the most often missed problems in the class, which is solving a 3rd or 4th degree polynomial equation. You're going to have to do that on the test, and in all likelihood, you're going to have to do it on the final exam. So I highly encourage you to learn this problem well, because then you get points for it on the first test, and you get points for it on the final, right? This is that one that's in depth. You use the rational root theorem, right? Then you pick out a root, and using long division, you divide out the obvious factors that you can get your hands on. And at some point, you're left with a quadratic equation, and you solve that using the quadratic formula. So that's the basic roadmap for that, how to do that problem. So, but each problem, when we're solving these higher degree polynomial equations, each problem's a little bit different, right? Some might have multiplicities that are greater than 1. Some might not. So you always can make a little bit different decisions when you're doing these, but make sure you know that overall strategy to get through a problem like this. Here's another one where I see students kind of know what they're doing, but they don't write this. They don't write enough information down for me to be sure that you know what you're doing. So notice how it says find and label all intercepts and asymptotes. So, sometimes I get students who come up with the right numbers, but they just write down like -1, 4, and 2. Well, none of that's labeled properly, so I don't know if you really know what any of it means, right? So remember, your asymptotes, a horizontal asymptote should be written in the form y equals. Vertical asymptote should be written in the form x equals. And then I say label them, so you have to tell me which is which. If you just give me the equations for 3 asymptotes, or however many asymptotes are in this problem, but you don't tell me which ones are the horizontal asymptotes and which ones are the vertical asymptotes, then I will have to assume that you don't know. So when it comes to the asymptotes, make sure you write them in equation form. That's the proper way to do it. And make sure that you label them. This is the horizontal asymptote. These are the vertical asymptotes. And then I know, oh yes, this student totally knows what's going on, full credit, right? Also, don't forget about the intercepts, but those are quite a bit easier, right? That's stuff we knew how to do back in algebra. Then we have some more problems with zeros of functions. So this is more like chapter 2 stuff. So we've got zeros of the function, multiplicities, the y-intercept, and then graphing, right? So you might have to go back to chapter 2 and look things over a little bit. List the zeros of this polynomial function. Again, chapter 2. Okay, so what I will do when we get closer to the exam is I will post solutions, but I do think it's important that students work on this without having the solutions, right? If you have the solutions at the same time that you're starting work on the practice test, Again, it's very easy to think that that's helpful, but a lot of times what's happening is the solutions is actually doing the work for you. So you want to spend some time with these problems before you see the solutions. That's why I'm releasing them at a later date. I also highly encourage you, but besides forming study groups with people in the class, that's why we had you get to know each other early on. So you have some good study groups to work on while you're doing the homework, but also before the exam. I also highly encourage you to use the tutoring center. And I know that you signed up for an online class and you might think, well, I don't want to go to campus. But if 1 or 2 visits to campus and going to the tutoring center are the difference between you passing the exam versus not passing the exam, that's better. Okay, trust me, it's in your best interest. There is a retake possibility, but again, for that, you're going to have to go to campus in order to do the retake. So, it's probably better if you go to campus a couple times and get some help and pass the test the first time, rather than having to go to campus later and do the retake, in which case you're probably going to want to go to the tutoring center before you do the retake. So I would encourage I can tell you, right? So you always want to take the advice of a professor who's in the class, who's running the class, right? Because, I don't know, at the time I've been in Ventura College, I've probably had maybe not 1,000, but close to 1,000 students come through this class. So I see what works and what doesn't work. And there's only a few simple things, right? If you're doing the homework on a regular basis, you're probably going to be successful in the course. My students that go to the tutoring center in general outperform the students who don't, right? Why is that? Well, as soon as they don't know how to do something, they're getting help in the tutor center, and then they get it all figured out. So those are 2 of the biggest things. Students who stay consistent with the homework and are doing it on a regular basis. Students who go to the tutoring center, probably going to do well in the course. By not doing those things, then you're opening it up and the performance starts to drop. So please be aware of those things. I rarely hear a student tell me that they went to the tutoring center and it was a big waste of time. Generally what I hear is, I went to the tutoring center and they really helped me learn all these 3 different problems that I didn't know how to do, right? And right now, it's sort of testing season in my classes over the next, my on-ground classes. We're doing tests right now. So there's a lot of my students are taking the practice test to the tutoring center. You're totally welcome to do that. I do recommend that you work on the material before you take it to the tutoring center, but then by all means, take the practice test to the tutoring center, take it to your study groups, take it to whatever works, right? So that you can learn this material and get them correct on the exam. So I will be posting, like I said, I will be posting solutions later. Those will come at a later date, but I don't want to give them out now, because then what I find is students just kind of shortcut the whole studying process by looking at the solutions right away. And believe it or not, for most people in most situations, that's not going to help you learn it. It's just going to help you finish the practice exam sooner, right? So that's why I'm kind of waiting on that. So I will update you soon on the actual testing procedure, but that's going to be closer to the end of October. So for now, just focus on the studying, just focus on getting ready for the test. And then when the test rolls around, I'll roll out information about how exactly all that's going to work. Okay? Thanks, everybody.